This morning I'm standing at the high shoals of the Appalachia. Back in the early 1800s, this used to be the boundary line between Georgia here to your left and Creek country there to your right. After the Louisiana Purchase, Washington, D.C. had to somehow communicate with New Orleans. And they could get the mail there by boat, or they could get it there by horse. And the high shoals is where they started the postal route that connected Washington, D.C. to New Orleans. And so you got to think early 1800s, 1804 to 1806 or something like that. Imagine standing here at these high shoals with a horse and a bag of mail, and your destination was Washington, D.C. Now granted, you want to go all the way to D.C., you'd get a certain ways down the trail and hand off that bag to the next guy. But these high shoals here are where Georgia would then be connected to New Orleans through Creek country. Nowadays they've dammed up this river, as with many rivers here in Georgia. But back in the 1800s, Georgia, being a land of rivers, you had to cross a lot of rivers. And you would utilize these shoals here as an easy means of crossing them. Walton County was founded in 1818, and this is one of the earliest settled areas of the county, was High Shoals, or as it's known nowadays, North High Shoals. One thing I really dislike about the current state of these high shoals, not only the dam, but all this is private property around here, so you cannot go out onto the shoals, which I think is a shame. If you live around here, you either have a gather sign in your living room, or you have 2x4s that you've painted white and made into crosses and painted Bible scriptures all over them and posted them in your front yard. But today we're going to cross into Walton County, and we're going to go check out some of my favorite cemeteries. Just inside the county, still here in High Shoals, we've got the Baptist church on that side, Methodist church on this side. One of the more unique monuments, I always look at it as I drive by, is this here. And it's got a shelf in here, and sometimes I've wondered if this was ever glassed in, like if there was a glass face on it or anything like that, but there's no sort of rim to mount it. So it may have just always kind of been this little nook right here. Nonetheless, kind of unique. We're down here off Laughlin Cemetery Road. This is another one of my favorite little cemeteries in the county. What initially drew me to this cemetery was the road name, Laughlin Cemetery Road. And I just started driving down it, figuring there was a cemetery somewhere down it. It's a little one-lane gravel road. And I found this here. It's way out here in the country. And someone maintains it. It's really pretty. This is actually Hughes Cemetery. And there is a Laughlin Cemetery further up the road. And so when you're coming down Laughlin Cemetery Road, you can find Hughes Cemetery, but you may find yourself driving right by Laughlin Cemetery and not realize it. Sometimes when I have to drive out to Athens, I'll stop by this cemetery and just spend a couple moments. It's really pretty out here. It's far enough away from the roadways where it can get nice and quiet. A common sight you'll see out here in some of these country cemeteries is they would use field stones to mark the burials. So you've got a little tiny one right here, potentially a footstone, kind of far out for that grave there, but nonetheless, it's the 1850s, and I can't imagine it was easy to get a stone out here. And when someone would die, you'd just pick up a rock and mark a grave with it. One of the interesting things in this cemetery, if you look at this stone, the way it's sitting, it'd make you think this is for W.E. Hughes. And there's a field stone here. And they've even put the S backwards. Died in 1856. But if you look around on the other side of it, you'll see carved on there is Philip Hughes. So this stone was reused. And when observing the footstones here, you can come down to where what I believe is the actual burial place of William E. Hughes. He got one of these government markers here He fought in the Indian Wars, again died in 1856. And who I presume to be maybe his wife, Minervia. I don't know how to pronounce that. Well, it makes me think that that is actually the grave of Philip. And this is the grave of William, not only because of the government marker, but they have footstones here. An M there, and then a W there. So these are potentially, I'm standing potentially at William's head here, and Minerva, or however it's said, there. And so, while it looks like he's buried twice here, this is actually the grave of Philip on the back side of that stone there. So I'm armed with my cemetery book that I've stopped by real quick. This is Laughlin Cemetery. It's on the side of someone's house. So, yeah, that's it. This star-shaped building here, and you can see it from 78 if you know where to look. This is where George L. Pike is buried. And back in the middle of the 20th century, I believe in the 50s or 60s, he started a church. I think it was called Little Bethlehem, at least that's what the sign says there. But read the history about it, and it's been a while, but they wanted to make their own little society out here, and they built a market, and we're going to create their own money system. And one way or another, things turned to shit, and it's still an active church, but you can look up and read about it. It's got some interesting history out here. But that little star mausoleum, there's a guy buried in there, and I've always wanted to go in there and check it out. And one time I talked to the guy's son, but I just didn't have the heart to be like, oh, I'm obsessed with cemeteries. Can I go see where your dad's buried? And so I just got to shoot it from the roadside here. We're at the corner of Pleasant Valley and Georgia Highway 11 here. I haven't been to this cemetery before. Parked way the hell over there, crossed the road, came into Woodline to film. But show you another example of some of these cemeteries back in here. One thing I really love about some of these old cemeteries is just how big the trees are back in here. I imagine most of this was probably at once a farm, and you can hear the road. And maybe if you know just where to look, you could maybe see this from the road, but unless you're on Find a Grave or looking at these cemetery books, you'll never know this is here. It's a really beautifully carved willow there at the head of that grave. And these are some good examples of some of these box tombs here. And if you ever wonder if they're buried inside that, no, they are not. They are underground. Look at the size of this thing. Beautiful tree. This cemetery is most likely long forgotten. I'm sure the property owner knows it's here, but this is really cool. This is one of my favorite things, is to find a cemetery here in the county and go wander in and find it, if nothing more than to see some of the large trees that grow within them. On to the next. We're at the Toller Cemetery, established in the 1800s. It's real common once you get outside of Loganville or Monroe and you get out into the country. A lot of these cemeteries are still surrounded by cow pasture. Last time I was here, there was a whole group of cows here, and I went and sat on that bench and hung out for a little bit. And the cows are just walking, bobbing their heads. And as I've mentioned previously, a lot more of these field stones. Here's a real pretty one here. And you'll see some of these are quartz, which is common in the area. So it's as if they're grabbing a more significant stone. Even these older cemeteries still have active burials. This man was buried in 2020. I really love the bat signal that he's got. And the family has put a couple benches next to the grave. A real peaceful place to be laid to rest. Cows. Cows. Let's go say hi. Cow! Little baby cows. Even the Queen of England says cow when she sees a cow. Them old boys staring right at me. Cow! Cow! Oh, it's pissing. Okay. Well, it is the next day. It's now Christmas Eve. I got to downtown Monroe yesterday and slipped and fell on a tattoo. But this is where I was heading. This is the Old Baptist Church Cemetery. The church was founded in 1829. Very first thing I noticed is this little kitty sitting there at the tree, and something tells me I won't be able to pet it. The land for this cemetery was donated by Elijah Betts, who was the founder of Monroe in 1821. He donated a 100-foot square around his mother's grave, Martha Morgan. And this is the grave of Martha Morgan here. Stone reads, "Sacred to the memory of Martha Morgan, the mother of Elijah Betts, who erected this stone as a monument of his regard for an affectionate mother. She immigrated from Virginia to this place in 1820 and died on the 12th of August, 1826 in the 67th year of her age. She had been a member of the Baptist Church upward of 40 years and died a bright Christian. Glory be to God." And I've got my Walton County Cemetery book here, and that's where I read that Elijah Betts donated a 100-foot square around his mother's grave, and yet there's a fence right there. And so are there graves on the other side of the fence, or did he not get the whole 100-foot square around his mom's grave? This is one of those cemeteries that you can drive right by and not know it's here. All the graves are kind of sporadic. A lot of this open space right here more than likely has graves without markers. I am speculating, but I really enjoy like the little random rock walls. This is the grave of Henry Harden. He was a Revolutionary War veteran. In Wayfarers in Walton, which is the Walton County history book, it mentions how Henry Harden also donated land along with Elijah Betts. And that's where his mom's buried, just right there. So I assume we're within that 100 feet. This guy way back here was an English professor at Mercer. Stone reads, "He made Mercer University his life and his likeness." Just more of the random assortment of walls within this cemetery. I've eaten lunch on these graves. This is the grave of another Revolutionary War veteran here. This is John Walker, and his stone is broken, and it's had a really cool part of his epitaph. And to reference this book here, it says, "But he is gone, his tongue is still in death." You can see right there, you can kind of see his tongue at the break. And then death there. And it also goes on to have a little bit more carved into the stone. And that is not in the book. Yet another reason to come out to the cemetery and see what else you can find. This tall obelisk here. And really throughout this cemetery, it's one of the earlier cemeteries here in Monroe. You can see some born in 1700s graves. Mr. John Walker over there was also born in the 1700s. And all these smaller stones here, you can tell by the width of the grave, more than likely these were children. And they just have initials carved in them. There are quite a few through here. This one here actually has a little more carving on it. It says infant son of W.S. and L.M. Walker. This is something really cool I haven't noticed before. This obelisk here for the wife of Reverend W.S. Walker, Miss Lillian. On it, it reads that they were married in China, September 19th, 1883. Kind of a cool gate design. I'm now in Rest Haven Cemetery. This is sort of the main large cemetery in Monroe. If you're ever in downtown Monroe and walking around, this is just a short walk from downtown. And one of the most notable burials here, which I'm standing right next to, is Moyna Michael. Moyna Michael is otherwise known as the Poppy Lady. She was the originator of using the poppy as a remembrance for those who died in World War I, and she was from Good Hope. You can see on the grave it's got a poppy flower. Went on a tour of this cemetery one time, and I was shown a headstone. It's a flat headstone, and it's hand carved and misspelled, and it's something about some German guy that blew into town, and I cannot find it for the life of me. So if you find it, send me the GPS coordinates. Though it's winter, I find that this is a really beautiful plant here with the red little berries, how the leaves have turned a deep red. This is the McDaniel-Titchener Warfield plot. There's the McDaniel-Titchener house in downtown Monroe that you can take tours of. And this is the grave here of Henry D McDaniel. He was a governor of Georgia. Originally, he completed the term for Alexander Stephens, who died in office in 1883. And then McDaniel was re-elected as governor. He signed the Georgia Local Option Liquor Law, which allowed localities to prohibit the sale of liquor. This was before Prohibition in the 1880s. Imagine living right there, and the window to your bedroom overlooks this. This is kind of a weird one here. I don't think that's the top of the vault. It'd be awfully shallow. Oh, Shag Hennessy. We're here at Gum Creek Baptist Church. It's off Center Hill Church Road. This church was founded in 1824, and you'll find some of the older burial styles like the box tombs. Over here there is a fencing of field stones for this grave here. And this here is one of my favorite stories of burials here in the county. Legend says that these box graves contain 20 to 30 settlers each. So a total of 40 to 60 people are buried here. And as the story goes, they were killed by bees. I've always thought that was a bit of a fantastical story. And as a big Southeast Indian history nerd, part of me thinks they were potentially killed by Indians. And if it's early 1800s, the last thing you want to go telling people as you're trying to get people to move to the county is that there's hostile Indians here. And so what better way to sort of masquerade that than to say that a bunch of people were killed by bees. There's no marking on these. And you can see some of these stones were carved. But I've always loved these. I wonder if at one time there was some sort of insignia or carving on the front that has been lost to time. But in an otherwise little tiny cemetery here, there are these here which tell a really cool story. Here in the East Walton County Cemetery book, you'll see about in the center of the frame there where it tells the story about those settlers that were killed by bee stings. These box tombs are also very common in this area, long covered by moss, and who knows if they ever had anything carved on the top. I'm sure some of them may have had some measure of carving, a name, a death date, but now they're just covered in moss. So I'm at Bay Creek Baptist Church here, and I've got my Wayfarers In Walton book with me, and I read a little bit about it, and it talks about how it was originally at Shiloh Primitive Baptist, which is where I was headed next. In 1837, a congregation split off and founded this church here. One thing I've always loved about this cemetery is that it's on a high point in the land, so you get a really good view of the surrounding area. This is a really pretty run of monuments right here. I wouldn't be surprised if at one time those monuments may have had some sort of urn on top of them. You'll often see these types of monuments here in the South. These are preachers' pulpits, and they have Bibles on the top of them. The right one has Holy Bible inscribed on it. Also on the front of those are gates of heaven. You can see this one is really beautifully carved. It's got that golden sidewalk. And then their daughter buried next to them, whose name is Dixie Bama. I really love the rope carved around the edge of this here. So this is Shiloh Primitive Baptist Church Cemetery, the original site of Bay Creek Baptist Church Cemetery. Buried here is Abel Gowery. He's a Revolutionary War veteran. One grave that's always stuck out to me is this grave here. I've always loved the cedar and the brick and the way the moss is growing on it. And it's Sunday, so I'm playing a dangerous game coming to these churches. This church was founded not 5 years after the founding of the county. It was founded in 1823. It's a really good example of some box graves through here. Really shouldn't have come here on a Sunday. People are starting to show up for church, and this will be short-lived. Nonetheless, this is a really cool cemetery. It's one of the original cemeteries in the county. And I really wanted to show that one grave with the brick and the cedar tree right there. So we will leave quickly. And last but not least, I've come to Loganville to film what I think is the only mausoleum in Walton County. It's for James Moore. And there's a statue for him right there, and he is overlooking the town of Loganville, which is right there. This mausoleum is made of white marble. Rest on embalmed and sacred dead, so good and pure and brave. No cruel footstep here shall tread the beauty of thy grave, nor shall thy glory be forgotten, while time the record keeps, and honor points the sacred spot where Christian proudly sleeps. On God's eternal camping ground, thy silent tents are spread, while angels guard the solemn hound, thy sacred dreamless bed. 78's right there, and you can see this from the roadway. And growing up as a kid, I would always notice his statue here. On his statue, he's got a broken brim on his hat. And he also has a tree stump next to him, which oftentimes represents a life cut short. But he lived from 1838 to 1915, so it's a good life, but maybe he died by accident or something like that. It's a really beautifully carved monument. When I was a kid, I used to ride my bike up through Loganville and hit all these little skate spots, and I'd sometimes come by here. I just always thought the mausoleum was so cool. Again, it's the only one in Walton County that I know of. I think I'll end my video here at Mr. James Moore's Mausoleum. There's plenty more cemeteries and lots more history, but this will do for now.